Lord be with you.
And also with you.
My 9.5 years here at Grace, I've learned many things that can be boiled to fit into 3 understandings of ministry. First, it all begins with God. God works through people, and it's all about relationships. It all begins with God. That first summer that I worked at Agape Curie Beach Ministries as a camp counselor, the closing worship had a skit as its sermon or homily. And during that skit, what happened was you heard 2 voices. One was the voice of someone who had fallen off a cliff and was hanging on for dear life by a root or a tree or of some sort. And the second was that of God. Because you see, the person that was hanging on by that tree or that root was calling out for help, crying for help, and eventually cries for help from God. And then in this dialogue that ensues after the fact, it's God telling this person to just let it go. Let go of what you're holding on to. Now you can imagine a person holding on to the only thing that they felt was there for them, hanging on to all of life by this one little shred. And God saying, just let go. Give your worries over to me because I care for you. I care about you. Then it all ends with the simple phrase, let go and let God. Over the last couple weeks, we have focused in on 1 Peter and what call means. 1 Peter 5:6 says, cast all of your anxieties on him because he cares for you. As we go about our work for God in our lives, we'll still suffer from both our own humanity, suffer from the pain caused by our own bodies or by our own decisions. God is there in those situations where pain exists. Sometimes, though, we don't understand it or don't see it until afterwards. Sometimes we might just need to loosen our grip just a little, just enough to allow Christ to be in those situations, to work in those situations that are really beyond our control. Or to take responsibility for our own actions, yes. But it's not a question about responsibility, but a recognition of what we are in control of. Giving to God what is not in our own control. Cast all of your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Why is it that we hold on to so much for ourselves and not let God into situations? Why is it that we declare that God is so large, so powerful, so great as to be able to create this world, but yet we don't allow God into the small situations of our lives, to be a presence, to give us strength in our weakness? Why is it that we declare God's grace and love so amazing that it can overcome anything, can change lives, but for some reason don't believe that it is for us as well? And so we still hold on to those sins that have been tripping us up for years. We do not think that God's love is actually for us too. We are people who hold on. And because of our tenacity to hold on, we are riddled with anxieties. We hold on to so much that tears us away from God and from each other. The anxieties we face tear us apart, causing us worry and concern. And they cause us to shut down at times. I've met people whose anxieties are so strong that they avoid the world, and worry about every little detail that is out of their control, failing to experience life. And these are smart people. And there are those who avoid others who, in the last interaction, it wasn't such a great conversation or left on not such great terms. And now something new needs to be said that you don't want to necessarily tell someone, but it needs to be said. Others just lash out in their anxieties, or some might even dull their anxieties with alcohol or drugs, just numbing it out to not feel it anymore. Many of us, though, gather the necessary courage to take on anxieties head on, confident that they can be overcome. What we hear today is that we are not alone in conquering the suffering produced by our anxiousness, to give up our anxieties and release them to Christ, because Christ cares for us. In release, we are freed to be children of God, the children that Christ calls us to be. And if it begins with God, then all of our anxieties are God's anxieties and not our own. And we should give them to their rightful place. It's not the same as saying that we should avoid taking action, but the anxiety of the action is given over to God. We're not to work to produce more anxiety, because we still have to live with the consequences of our actions. Let's take a moment to consider what makes us anxious. Things begin to change around us, and we get anxious because of what might come next. We get worried about the words we speak to other people, who it might be that we've offended, or go over those scenes over and over in our heads as we try to sleep. We get anxious and worry about, only to find that we're worried about something that's already been done. We just need to pick up those pieces. Or a mistake that was made years ago in what we said or did that continues to haunt us. A sin against another person, which we're having a hard time forgiving ourselves for. Then there's those who come with anxieties, determining how others are living their lives as if they have more control over them than they have over themselves. Sure, we can speak our thoughts, but they still have to make their own decisions. Cast all your anxieties to Him, because He cares about you. It all begins with God. God works through people. As people of God, we're called to use the gifts that we have to take on new and exciting opportunities. We're not called to go outside those gifting areas, but to work within the gifts that we've been given, to work and develop those gifts and skills for God's purposes, to grow ourselves in different ways, especially when we're asked to help by using those gifts. Little by little, we are being prepared for those new opportunities that might arise as we grow and learn. We might get anxious when we're not able to visualize exactly how to get to the end of what needs to be done. Now, over the last 9.5 years, we've taken on and accomplished considerable tasks together, allowing God to work through us as a congregation, God working through many of you individually, to allow your gifts and knowledge to shine through, so that as a whole, as a congregation, we could grow the kingdom of God. As a congregation, we turned anxiety over to God, and grace allowed God to work through us to begin a new congregation, GPS Faith Community. If we would have done it individually, it simply would not have happened. Each of us allowed God to work through us to start something new. Sure, some went on to help GPS and stayed, but several of you returned, seeing your work there as done. The start of GPS was God working through us to expand God's kingdom. And then there's Friday Fun Fest. I remember a lot of the anxiety when we started that little program. It's since become one of the defining features of Grace in this neighborhood. There was a program that was birthed out of reading through the history books and seeing what Grace used to do, and looking around and saying, what might be done now? Remember, once the idea was sprung, trying to convince people to help out for, say, 6 weeks at a time. And now 6 years later, we continue to help out. Remember those early conversations, too. They were riddled with anxiety. like the voice of the one person who I've forgotten who it was, but I'd asked her to get her group together to come help the children learn to knit, to lead that small encounter group. I don't remember exactly who it was, but what I remember happening was getting a phone call one day and her saying to me, I don't get exactly what you want us to do. You want us to teach these kids to knit. How? Didn't really know exactly how to respond. So I just said to them, well, and as I was thinking about it, I was like, well, you have children, you have some grandchildren. How about you just teach them like you're teaching your children or grandchildren to knit? It's not a new skill. It's just being stretched to try something new. Try something a little differently. Because I don't believe that God always expects us to learn a totally new skill, but to use what we've already experienced, what we've already done, to try new experiences, to try new things for God's kingdom. The skill is there. The desire was there to use their skill. But there was anxiety in being stretched to do something new with those skills. That is God working through people. As a recent aspiring Eagle Scout said when presenting his project to council, to do this project is the culmination of all the learnings and leadership over the years, all the merit badges, all the experiences that they've had through Scouts. That's what the Eagle Scout project is about. As Christians, we are continually putting to use what we've learned in our lifetimes to share it with others for God's kingdom. This is even true in the projects that we take on our own, or the conversations of life that we have, or the relationships that are built in this community where life is shared together. God works through people. It's all about relationships. Last week, someone who has grown up here at Grace said goodbye. They had to go back to school and wouldn't be here this weekend. And that's when it hit me in my heart. Realized that there are many stories here at Grace, a lot of relationships that have been developed over the past 9.5 years, a lot of stories that have been created. I've walked with many of you, and we've experienced together the joys of life. For many of you, it's been marriage, or a birth, or a baptism, or accomplishing goals in life, such as graduation or retirement. We've walked together in suffering, illness, of deaths, of hardships. We've also walked together in the ordinariness of life and the tough questions that sometimes get experienced. We've taken trips together to see what God might be up to in other parts of the world, of the U.S., mission trips with many of the youth, the Dream Center, conferences, summer camps. And for others, we've shared a meal together just to simply share what God is up to in our midst. For those relationships, I am grateful for the honor and privilege of being able to walk with you, allowing me to be a part of your lives, to be your pastor for the last 9.5 years, to be part of so many relationships, so many stories of life together. The time has truly been a blessing. This morning I started out by talking about anxieties and handing them over to Christ. Yes, in my excitement and energy to start something new at Living Waters, I am anxious. And over the past couple weeks, I've heard anxiety about my departure and what that means for Grace. For both of us, let us remember that it begins with God. And I'm excited and anxious to see how God will work through me next, knowing that God has prepared me for this opportunity through my time here and through other experiences in life. And I know that God will continue to use people to accomplish God's work, God's mission here at Grace. I will carry with me and cherish the relationships that I've made and developed over the years. They're meaningful to me. And I look forward to returning here on your 100th anniversary year and hearing how God has used you in the meantime. I will continue to keep you in prayer, Grace, that God's work will be done through you, that Christ's example will shine through all of what you do, that Christ will take yours and mine's anxieties so that you will know of his care. Amen.